for joining us, and hello to everyone who will watch the replay. I'm Rachel Kanarowski. I am the founder of Year of Living Better, and in the work that I do, I am very involved in mental health advocacy, in particular for the workplace. And because of that, I wanted to invite my good friend, Kara Richardson Whitely, on this morning. She's CEO of the Gorgeous Agency, and she does a lot of work with workplaces around weight stigma. She's been consulting organizations on the way that they can both be more inclusive employers and also appeal to a wider customer base as well. But today we're going to keep our conversation focused on the workplace. We're going to be discussing new legislation that has passed in New York City that holds workplaces accountable for weight bias at work. So, Kara, thank you for joining, and talk to me a little bit. How is this legislation changing things? We'd like to know more.
Thank you so much for having me on, Rachel. It's such a delight to talk to you always, but especially in this context. It's really important that the conversation about weight stigma in the workplace is so urgent right now because New York City just passed a size discrimination law. And so there are many others that are either in effect or in the works around the country. So it's time for people to start to pay attention about how diet culture has seeped into corporate culture, and then work on ways to make your workplace safe and inviting for all bodies.
So, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What does it really mean, safe workplace? So when we're thinking about bodies, I've never seen anyone discriminated against for their size. And I'm playing devil's advocate, of course. We do see things come up in the workplace, but for those who are really questioning that, what does this look like when it's happening at work?
Right. Studies have shown that there's a tremendous amount of unconscious bias when it comes to folks in larger bodies, particularly. In fact, a recent study showed that negative thoughts about other marginalized groups have decreased when negative thoughts and sentiments towards people in larger bodies has in fact increased. And so when you think about your workforce or your potential pool of talent, 65% of Americans are in larger bodies. So in the female identifying space, that would be a size 14 and above, right? So that's the plus size market that we talk about. In men's fashion, that's usually called big and tall, right? Mm-hmm. So if 65% of your talent or potential talent is in a larger body, and your policies and just your way of being within the workplace is tainted by this unconscious bias, well, you're not going to be looking at a person as a whole. You might be looking at someone just because of their weight. And a recent Wall Street Journal article shared how weight discrimination is, present from the application to a job, to advancement with a job, pay differentials within the workplace, and then when it comes to leadership, it's almost it's really hard to find people in larger bodies making the next steps to advance leadership within their companies.
Yeah. And, aside from the unconscious bias piece, what are some other reasons? I'm thinking about even like company outings, company social events, which, might not feel inclusive to someone in a larger body. What are some kind of, obvious ways or maybe subtle ways that this might show up at a kind of a leadership level when we're deciding who to advance?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the day-to-day, we're talking about conversations that may not be appropriate for work. And when I say that diet culture has seeped into corporate culture, I'm talking about somebody making a comment about food. Maybe it's for their own body. They might say, we've read stories about a boss saying something like, I can't eat this cupcake because I'm going to the beach this weekend and I'll look so fat. When the person that they work with is in a larger body and they're like, am I disgusting? Just because you're making these outwardly fat phobic comments, you might be causing harm within the workplace on the day to day. And they can be all sorts of things from, talking about food choices when you're out to eat with your team, ordering lunch, or making a comment about someone else's weight. And it can work both ways. I have two dear friends, actually had two dear friends, one is passed. Both of them lost a tremendous amount of weight. One was going through something really, really terrible in her personal life, and she was living on adrenaline and didn't try, but she just suddenly, her weight just plummeted. And another one was dying of cancer. And the
Mhm.
interactions with the people that she worked with were all about, you look amazing. And so there's a thoughtfulness that is sometimes missing because this attribute is so cherished in a way that is really harmful to people just trying to exist and perform and do their best for your company.
Yeah, I'm going to raise my hand and say that I had that. I was unfortunately the person making that comment once. I had not seen someone in quite a long time who I used to work with, and we went out to lunch, and your mind is noticing that a body has changed, and in her case, it was due to a medical condition. So, that was the very painful way to learn not to comment on other people's bodies. I've been asked before if I'm pregnant. Someone, opened up a space to me, in line ahead of them at the DMV once. I wasn't. I was just wearing pants that I guess gave me that look. We've been on the receiving end of this most of the time, but I'll say I've been on the end of being the person who's made that comment, and less about me feeling terrible, which of course I did, but really regretting how that must have made my friend feel. So I just
But I just
encourage,
want
yeah,
to, I want to say and validate that that's totally normal because of the culture that we live in today. And so
yeah,
it's important, and why trainings are so important, or conversations with leadership, is that we need to just rewrite the script about folks' bodies. And I
yeah,
also was on the receiving end. My body has shifted and changed over the years as well. And when I was a newspaper reporter, I saw this just glaring example of, I had a triple digit weight loss and I was basically starving myself. But people would just open the door for me when they never did. They'd follow me in the bathroom and ask me, what are you doing and how long has it taken you, and in many ways it perpetuated some really disordered eating habits.
yeah.
And so, you know you don't have to be in a larger body to be sensitive and affected by these comments about body. You don't know what the story is with someone's body. And so that's the awareness that you have to build into teams that just doesn't exist simply because of the way our culture has framed weight over the years. For me personally, I struggle with lipedema. Lipedema is a fat disorder where a lot of it has accumulated between my navel and my knees, and it takes surgeries to remove that tissue from my body. And I've had 3 so far, and I still live in a larger body, right?
Yeah.
And so you just don't know the narrative. You don't know if somebody's in recovery from an eating disorder. You don't know what is going on, and so it's time to start finding other ways to complement, to talk about our own bodies in corporate spaces, because now it's the law. It's the law that you need to treat folks in diverse bodies equally.
And so when we talk about this law, what are the possible penalties that a company can receive if they're seen as not addressing issues that are raised with HR?
Of course, and of course, there's many different kinds of penalties, and it depends from state to state. But I will tell you that even if you're listening here and you're like, oh, I'm in Montana and I don't see a weight discrimination law, so we're good to go here. We can fat shame till all day, but that's not the case, because even in spaces where these laws don't exist, you can sue for being treated less than a human. I'll give you an example. Um, at the Bellagio many years ago, there was a server, and his name was Andy. And Andy lived in a larger body. And so his colleagues thought it would be funny to call him Fat Andy. And they didn't just call him Fat Andy, they put Fat Andy behind plexiglass where he couldn't remove it at his weight station. And every day he showed up, and this was his nickname that people called him. And the people who passed by his weight station would now know that he is Fat Andy. Well, Fat Andy walked away with a $500,000 settlement for that kind of weight discrimination. And so it doesn't, these size discrimination laws that are coming on the books will help to build awareness that this kind of treatment is unacceptable and actually unlawful. But the more that people are talking about it around the country, the more you need to build awareness within your company about what kind of conversations, what kind of actions, and what kind of unconscious bias, particularly in the hiring space, you're choosing one candidate over the other, and that candidate is in a larger body or in a diverse body. And I'm talking about maybe, for example, someone with dwarfism, right?
Mhm.
If they're equally can't qualified for the job and you're overlooking them, just based on size, then you would face penalties as well.
Yeah, because the law actually, I noticed that in the writing of the law, it has to do with weight and I believe they say height.
That's correct. That's correct. So
Yeah.
it's
Um,
very complicated.
yeah. So the weight is the one that I see it more obviously in many workplace policies. For anyone who is not familiar with the Maintenance Phase podcast, which I know, Kara, you're a fan of, I'm a fan of. So, a wonderful education conversation podcast between two hosts about the way that we've been misinformed for years about a lot of stories about people in larger bodies being unhealthy. I'm particularly thinking about the way that that comes up often in workplace wellness challenges. Are those included as part of this legislation? Will those still be allowed? The who can lose the most weight, or the healthy month.
Yeah, and exactly you know, whether or not they're allowed in laws, really they're terrible practices because again, you may be unleashing someone's eating disorder, you
Yeah.
may be triggering people, and also you may be facing not only size discrimination concerns but also accessibility concerns, because some folks may have medical conditions where they may be carrying excess weight because of a medication they're taking, or again, it may be a medical condition. And so you're leaving out either bonuses or benefits for some people who don't have access to weight loss. And also, studies have shown that the majority of diets fail. I mean, an alarming majority of diets fail. And so, again, you're kind of setting up people for failure with these kinds of challenges. Now, and this is where things get a little bit sticky in the work that I do in help building awareness about, body inclusion in the workplace. That doesn't mean that you can't encourage nutrient dense foods and nourishing your body, right? Moving your body and the work that you do, Rachel, in that stress relief and mindfulness about your body, those are all incredible things to encourage. And so where you draw the line is is that your body needs to change to feel worthy in this workplace, right?
Yeah.
That's where we draw the line because
Yeah.
people show up as they are. They may choose individually to make changes in their body, right? That the other sticky topic that I'm actually about to be on the Today Show talking about, should workplaces provide weight loss drugs and what about surgeries and all these other things? Well, if somebody makes a decision with their healthcare provider that they want to do whatever, right? To change their body, change their health portrait, right? That's different. But at the workplace, people need to be able to show up as they are in the body that they're in to feel successful, right?
Yeah.
Feel like they are enough in this very moment.
Yeah. Well, I love that you a couple of times have brought us back to the fact that it's not just about discrimination against people in larger bodies, that this a diet culture, conversations about food choices, conversations about people's weight can, and when you say trigger, I mean, you're really talking about triggering an eating disorder, triggering those behaviors that we know. And I know you've done a lot of work with the Eating Recovery Center. Remind me. Yep.
Yes.
The When we're talking about these eating disorders, we know that these disorders are things that are health risks, behaviors that are health risks. We have a lot of data around that. So even though someone may be in a body that passes for the cultural ideal of that particular organization, that particular group, that we don't know if that person might be behaving in ways that are really harming their body. So I think that that's really important as a part of why we just want to avoid conversations about food in the workplace. I also read a lot of popular science and books written by researchers about habits, about behavioral science. I'm putting together a workshop right now on habits that I'll be giving for NOAA in Maryland, actually, in a few days. And I just want to say, even if you're working in research, if you're working in an editorial position, please stop talking about food as it relates to habits in your literature. I know that a lot of studies are funded that way, but I'm looking through the book, which I've recommended, which I really enjoy, Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wendy Wood, who is a researcher. And there are large sections of the book that I feel could trigger someone's eating disorder because of the way that food is talked about, that the moral decision is to avoid the coworker with the brownies. And I just think, my goodness, can't we let adults choose for themselves what they would like to eat and how they would like to enjoy their time? So that's my call. Even if you think you may be speaking to someone who may look like they are okay to have this conversation with, why is the workplace a place where we need to have this conversation?
100%. And, it's really important to understand that also, some of these health behaviors that we talk about, whether it's sleep, eating nutrient dense food, exercising, if folks in standard size bodies or smaller bodies aren't doing them, their health portrait might look, really bleak compared to somebody who you may, look at and feel and just judge as unhealthy. So again, we just got to get back to that mindset. I mean, of changing that mindset. I mean, when people look at my body, which is very pear shaped, they don't look at me and think, that's a woman who's climbed Kilimanjaro 3 times and hiked 100 miles of the long trail. The assumption is just there every time. So when I tell them that I've written a book called Gorge, My Journey of Kilimanjaro at 300 pounds, they're like, what? There's this shock factor, a disbelief. And same goes when I share that Chrissy Metz from This Is Us is helping me produce and will be starring as me in the movie. The initial comment almost always, it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction, is she gonna climb the mountain too? With the, just this assumption that she couldn't do it. There's no way. And it's just, first of all, it's not a documentary. She doesn't have to follow in my footsteps. Plenty of people do things in movies, go to the moon, murder people, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't actually happen. And yet that comment is there almost every time I share who my partner is in bringing this movie, my book, to life. So it's very fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm just going to put in a plug for Kara's book. I just started to listen to the book on audio, and it's a really incredible story. And I really appreciate how you talk at the beginning about all of the people who have gone to hike Kilimanjaro who have not made it to the top as well, and some who have. And I was really struck. I think it's Martina Navratilova, who we would think of as a picture of health, an athlete. So yeah, I think that we have so many preconceived notions, so much cultural baggage about what we think someone in a larger body must be, must, like the habits that they must have, the behaviors that must have led them. And I think that that does actually play into this workplace conversation, because there is this perception, oh, that person must just not have enough self-control. They must be lazy, right? And if we would believe that about someone, that might not be someone we want to elevate into a position of leadership. So
Yeah.
again, I really encourage people to check out Maintenance Phase as a podcast, because I think, especially their first episodes, do a really great job of really poking at this idea that these health claims are backed up in science that still holds up, because they frankly aren't.
Right. And in our workshops, we really do change, the Gorgeous Agency, especially with the New York City law coming into effect. There's so many businesses that are affected and really need to get up to speed urgently on this matter. And so we built a workshop to help challenge those notions, those narratives, and have provide a framework where you can pause on the ways that you're thinking about folks' bodies and see the value in seeing people just as they are and their strength without first looking at the weight.
That's great. I'm thinking about all of the organizations that probably know that they need to do something like this, especially those in New York City where this legislation is now in place. How can companies get in touch with you? How quickly can you organize something? Are we talking? Is this a one workshop session? Is it many? How can this look?
Right. That's a great question, Rachel, because I think where people feel most comfortable is just with a workshop to start building awareness, or a leadership, offsite or conversation just with leadership to start brainstorming on how can we talk about this in a way that feels comfortable, and then we do the workshop. And from there, people take deeper dives. And so the Gorgeous Agency folks focuses on two main tracks. One is in the HR space in the workplace. And so we would, if a company wants to do deeper work, we would talk about hiring policies and
Mhm.
talk specifically with hiring managers and do a deeper workshop with them. Also,
Awesome.
do an audit, which would be a policy review, look at any internal marketing to see if there are any pitfalls or peril within what already exists within the company, so that we can build a pathway for team members, again, for all bodies to feel welcome. And then in the retail space, when we're talking about the customer journey, which is a whole other conversation about how so many people are ignored from marketing. And so, again, we start with our workshop, our kind of core body inclusivity workshop, and then we take it to the next steps of either mapping out the customer journey and also auditing to see where there are places where we can build new pathways, because a lot of times people are scratching their heads of like, gosh, if we make plus size clothes, or how come we aren't getting this audience into our business, because there's 65% of Americans are in larger bodies. It should be so easy, but it's not. There's a lot of repair that needs to be done, because in the past, whether it's the workplace, the retail space, the travel space, so much harm has been done over many, many years. I mean, the fundamental thing that, whether you're an employer or a business owner, or within a corporation, is to understand that weight stigma is complex trauma, right?
Mm.
So that means that someone's feeling and sense of worth of self when it comes to their body shape and size is judged not only from social media. It could come from strangers on the street. It's often coming from your healthcare professionals, because
Yeah.
again, another whole other conversation. Could be coming from your team members or your employer, your boss, your corporate, umbrella. But and most heartbreakingly, when it comes to weight stigma, is oftentimes it's coming from home. And so
Mm.
people are bombarded with messages that they aren't enough. And so that repair and that self-worth, and even in coaching a team member who might be in a diverse body, it looks a little different than somebody who's had, thin privilege for all of their life. Their
Yeah.
their thoughts and feelings about what they're able and capable to do may be tamped down after years upon years of feeling unworthy just because of the body that they're in.
Yeah, so organizations can make a start by getting in touch with you and setting up a call to talk about what workshop might be right. I love the idea of that initial workshop with hiring managers. I think that's so relevant right now. So I'd really encourage anyone in HR who might be watching to reach out to Kara and at least have a conversation about what might be possible for your workplace. Um, I'm thinking about the way that stress intersects with choices that we make for our body for like to help to calm the anxiety that we might be feeling, the distress that we might be feeling. And in the work that I do with workplaces, we're really talking about burnout and stress and what might be causing stress in the workplace. And I see this show up, in terms of our bodies in conversations a lot. Some people, as they get more stressed, they forget to eat, they don't eat, or they choose to engage in behaviors that would look very healthy again, but it's because of the anxiety that they're feeling. And
Mhm,
others, myself included, during the pandemic, eating comfort food was one of the ways that I could feel more okay during 2020 and 2021. And so, I just want to mention that this stress that we feel intersects with choices that we might make that might change the way that our body looks. And so, again, really not bringing any extra blame, any extra judgment to that as a group, as a culture in an organization will be really important because people are probably struggling with it on their own.
mhm,
Yeah. In general, I would say if you are a leader and you can make choices for your team outside of these conversations that we're having about, what kind of food you might be talking about or what kind of food you might offer, activity challenges, these sorts of things. Um, those aside, let your team have enough time to get rest in the evening. It's very, very important when we think about mental health and stress and that stress load and what that does to our immune system, what that does to our health. It's very important that we're able to get enough rest at night. So really instituting these are off hours. If there's an emergency, this is the way to get in touch with me. But otherwise, putting pauses on email so that you have a delay send until a reasonable hour in the morning will be really important. Making sure that people feel comfortable turning off those Slack notifications at night. And probably the most importantly, modeling yourself as a leader, as someone who is not sending those late night emails, who is using that delay function to send emails. Because if you are saying that the policy is that there are these silent hours, there are these off hours from Slack, from email, from text message chains, but you yourself are choosing still to engage in those hours, that means that these rules do not apply to those who want to advance in the company. And so I think it's really important in terms of how it impacts all aspects of our health, how it impacts that stress load day to day, that leaders are modeling that they value rest and that rest is a value that others can safely hold.
It's such an important conversation, Rachel, because you know, um, I've I myself am in recovery from binge eating disorder. It's actually the most common and least talked about eating disorder out there. But one of my biggest triggers is sleep deprivation. I know that for sure, and through the work that I've done in recovery, right? And so, you and I were talking about how I didn't sleep well last night, and so that
Mhm.
for me means that I just need to be a little more gentle with myself today and notice and be aware of that, and prioritize rest tonight because it just means that means turning off my own, I own my own company, so I have to follow my own lead here, but you're 100% right on that. It's so core and crucial to healing on so many different levels and just recovering and being ready for the next day.
Yeah, because our lack of rest directly associates to how our nervous system is starting the next day. So we're essentially starting in more of a stress state if we don't get enough rest. And I don't want people who struggle with getting enough sleep, insomnia is an issue for them. I want this conversation to make them even more anxious and more concerned.
But it's we're talking about a health behavior here, and I think when framing well-being, the shift needs to come off weight loss is the primary goal, but instead these kind of health behaviors like you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Getting enough rest and prioritizing self-care, um, moving your body in a way that feels joyful and purposeful, right? And just also just being able to show up as you are, and I mean that on so many different levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really enjoying this conversation. One more thing I wanted to say related to the stress that we have. So you're getting enough rest as a leader. It changes the way that we might engage in our coping behaviors in the next day. Exactly. So, whether or not that's eating or drinking, but it also causes us to go back to biases that we have in our thinking. So when we are feeling anxious, when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling under pressure, which is how most people in a workplace would describe that feeling, right? Like feeling a little bit burnt out, feeling under pressure, feeling like they don't have enough time to get things done. If you as a leader are feeling that pressure, then you are going back to the biases that you have in your mind because your creative thought, your ability to be able to see things differently, to um, remember new behaviors that you're learning, you have less access to that part of your brain. So it's why it's important to do training in things like implicit bias, things like these common cultural behaviors that can happen in the workplace. Because if you're stressed as a leader, you're gonna go back to that bias that you have prior from a previous time. So you can see I didn't get enough rest myself last night.
We're all doing the best we can, Rachel.
Yeah. Well, I just I want to say I'm looking at our questions here. Are there anything else we haven't talked about in terms of cues that the workplace might send that all bodies are not welcome? I'm thinking that there's a return to office happening right now.
Of
Is there
course.
anything about the office environment that might need to be important and be considered?
Right, and this is where body inclusion lands squarely in the DE&I or DE&IB space is that you want to make your workplace as welcome as possible, and that doesn't just mean behaviors of team members at the workplace, but it also means like what's the physical setting of your workplace like? When someone comes in for an interview, is there a comfortable place for them to sit? Because can you imagine you're looking at your dream job, you've been preparing, I mean, for an interview for so long and feeling nervous, and then you go to sit down with the person interviewing you and you barely fit in the chair, or maybe you do but it's uncomfortable. And so thinking about the kinds of chairs that you have, think about artwork. Are there diverse bodies in your artwork? I can't describe how excited I was. I recently got my hair done, and the salon has these incredible paintings that are just really chic, really modern, contemporary paintings, and they just were diverse bodies and not all the same. And it was so cool. And I noticed, right? I noticed, and I don't like to spend money on going to the salon, but I felt welcome and home there. And so, whether it's for internal and external, you want to make sure that the spaces that you are entertaining people in the workforce or your potential clients or customers is welcoming in that way.
And I love that you bring up potential clients and customers because I'm thinking about how often you might invite a customer for an onsite. You might invite a customer for an event, and Yeah, and knowing that these same issues may intersect.
Mhm.
And, then you're talking about losing business,
Right.
and yeah, so I really do like, that's why I put in the headline of this is the cost that businesses are facing. We're talking about on one side, potential fines, but really on the other side, losing talent, potentially losing customers, really creating a workplace that feels more hostile and therefore is creating more stress for your team, and we see a dip in productivity when that happens. There are all kinds of ways that this cost shows up.
Right.
So one last question I have, if you are someone who feels that you are being discriminated against, if you're experiencing discrimination in your workplace, um, do you have any recommendations for how to safely and legally address this within your team?
Right. Well, there's a few things. If you're just looking for a primer on, like, what is weight inclusivity look like in a workplace, and how can I be a leader in this space? We actually are launching a course on thegorgeousagency.com, an online course, which is a really simple, basic core conversation for a starting point of where to go next. But absolutely, your HR department is a great place to start. But if you're not getting any help in that area, then, for example, you would reach out to the New York City Commission on talking to the folks who are in charge of the size discrimination program, and getting more assistance from there about what the next steps are. But we'll make sure that I'll put the link in the chat so you have the direct line if you're a New York City based team member for that.
Yeah, and I want to express, it should never fall on the employee to have to raise these issues. And
Mhm.
as we see layoffs happening in organizations, as as we see the potential for job loss, if we are the squeaky wheel, it can be really, really a difficult a decision to go and speak to HR about anything. And so I do want to normalize that. Um, a lot of people in your organization might not actually be saying anything because they may be afraid of being discriminated against for bringing anything up with the HR team.
100%.
I want to say, Kara, you have an incredible resource on your website, on thegorgeousagency.com, that I think a lot of people don't know about. You're curating articles that are showing up in the media, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that resource? Because it's free, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's correct. It is free. We have a body inclusivity library, and so whether you're a corporation or or looking for external information or HR focused information. So if you go to thegorgeousagency.com and you click on media and resources, you'll find the link to the resource library right there, and it's broken out by category and industry, and it's really a treasure trove of information if you just want to start doing this research on your own. But of course,
Wonderful.
we are here for you if you would like to book a call to talk about what next steps are to start building these kinds of conversations at your company. And don't worry, being a memoirist and now CEO of a company that deals with weight stigma, we are used to difficult conversations, and we know that it's sensitive, and we we build these conversations so that you can um, talk about body inclusivity with care and confidence.
I love that. I love that. Well, we will drop the link into the comments section underneath this video after we finish. But I really want to encourage you, go and check out this library, because educating yourself is a great place to start. So, Kara, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you this morning. I enjoy every conversation that we have, and yeah, I highly recommend that people check out Kara's book. I'm listening to it. She narrates the audio version herself, so if you want to hear her story as a plus size adventurer, I highly recommend it. I'm finding it very inspiring myself. So, anything you want to add before we jump off?
No, just visit us at thegorgeousagency.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're heading to Transform, I'll see you there. I'm one of the panelists. And I'm also doing a webinar for SHRM NYC on April 12th. So if you're a member of SHRM NYC, then hop on that and join us, and we'll deepen the conversation even more. But the fastest track to getting help on this topic is to reach out to us and book a call with the gorgeous agency.
Wonderful. I love that. Well, thank you to everyone who's joined. And if there's anyone who's watching this as a replay and has a question, feel free to tag Kara or myself there in the comments, and we'll be happy to respond to you. Or you can always reach out to us on DMs. It's been great to be here with you this morning, and we look forward to future conversations about mental health in the workplace.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.